Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Huddle Up with Howard. I'm Mike Claiborne here on ClaibsOnline.com. And also our special guest today is Rob Fischer, who I've known for a long, long time. He's one of the reporters and covers the Memphis Grizzlies of the NBA. But we're going to talk a little football with him because he's got an interesting scenario that he's constructed over the years that has, I think, been maybe the most objective way to rate college football teams. And also he can tell you a little bit all betting as well on the pro side. But Fish, it's good to have you on, man.
Man, it's good to be with you. It's always fun to talk football, especially this time of year in college football.
And of course, if we get bored, he can always give us the Lou Holtz impersonation of yesteryear, which basically got him into the business of broadcasting.
Right.
But anyway, I want to get to it quickly because I know your time is short. Let's talk about the fish scales. And tell us how you got that thing started. And you've been doing it for over 20 years now.
Yeah, this is the 25th year of the fish scales. It started when I was living in Las Vegas. Of course, that's where a lot of things start.
And in, by the way.
Yeah. And I was at a bar, and I'm frustrated with college football because to me, there was never a true national champion, because it was never determined on the field. It's always been determined by human beings, voters, who just are voting based on their on opinion. And it always amazed me that college football, these voters are voting on teams at the beginning of a season when we've never seen these teams play, because college football, there's such turnover on rosters every single year. So basically you're voting on reputation and reputation alone. And then you would move up and down the rankings based on wins and losses. It was an unfair system. And frankly, when you have 136 teams or whatever it is now, it is literally impossible to make it fair for everybody. And then when you have teams that are making $50 million on their television contract, and you have other teams that are making $4 million on their television contract, there are big differences between these teams. So I tried to come up with a way to make college football, I guess, fair is the right word. And I like to deem the fish scales, my ranking system, as the fairest, the best, fairest, and the most humble ranking systems in America. But
there's too high education coming out here, folks.
That's right. I've tweaked it a little bit throughout the years, but I've come up with a formula that I like. So it takes out all opinion. It's just a formula, and it puts everybody on an even field. And what it does is it will create a 4-team playoff, which eventually we've ended up having in college football. But it creates a 4-team playoff, but it also creates a 2-team championship for the non-Power 5 schools, which right now non-Power 5 schools don't have a chance to win a championship. They can go undefeated. They don't have a chance to win a championship. That's just the reality of the situation. So now if you have a championship for the non-Power 5 schools, now everybody has a chance to win a trophy. And isn't that what we want? Everybody to have a chance to win a trophy.
Yeah. And ice cream, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Fish, I was just going to ask, going back to the amount of years that you've done, let's just say the last 5 years, how has the fish scale rankings compared to the now college football playoff?
Most years it's been the same 4, but it's been in kind of a not reverse order, but different order at times. It's basically, I always love it too, because when I first come out with it, like this is the first week that they came out this year, I'll come out with it when the college football playoff ranking comes out as well, just to see the difference. And mine is completely different, and people will look at it and they'll start screaming, "Oh, how's this team here?" And I just always say, just wait, let it play out, and it'll play out. And by the time it plays out at the end of the season, you end up having usually the same teams that are in the playoffs. So it's something that I don't like about the college football playoff ranking. Again, there's just too much human opinion that's
emotion.
Based.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
Emotion. And no human being can watch every team in the country play.
No, not at all.
You can't. So
That's right.
there has to be a way to rank teams that makes it fair for everybody, makes it fair for a Coastal Carolina it's what's their record? 7-1, 6-1, makes it fair that they get a little credit for being 6-1. Make it fair that Tulane, a team that's 6-1, make it fair that they get a little credit for what they've accomplished this year. Am I saying a 6-1 Tulane is better than an Ole Miss? Not necessarily, but they may have accomplished more because their conference schedule is on par for them. Ole Miss's conference schedule is on par for them. So don't tell me when Ole Miss beats
Tougaloo State.
Well, this is what you'll hear. Ole Miss beat Vanderbilt. Well, yeah, but Vanderbilt's better than any team in the American Athletic Conference. Well, okay, they might be, but Tulane's in the American Athletic Conference. That's who they're playing. Those are the teams that are on their level. So I think it's been a good ranking that I've come up with that it makes it fair for teams all over the country to at least have a chance to be ranked and to possibly play for a title.
So scheduling has a lot to do with how these rankings work. And basically you're rewarding teams who play their schedule. And in some cases, because of their conference, they have no choice, but they beat teams on their schedule. And you also reward teams who go on the road and win.
Yeah, it's basically the rundown of the rules. It starts with number of losses, like we do with every other league in America. If you have 0 losses, you're ranked ahead of a team that's got 1 loss. Just makes a lot of sense. Every league in America does that. And then after that, it goes to big wins. Now, what I constitute are big wins are wins against teams with a winning record. If you have a winning record, you are a bowl team. So big wins to me constitute you beat bowl teams. Those are good teams. You beat a bowl team. Now, if you're a bowl team that's ranked in the fish scales, that counts more. You get it's weighted more if you beat a team that's ranked. It also counts more if you beat a team that's on the road. It also counts more if you beat a team in a neutral site. Those are all the things. And then it comes down to strength of schedule. And the strength of schedule is teams that you've beaten, the record of the teams you've beaten. Now, one other thing that's important, the games against AA programs, if you win those games, they don't count. If you play more than one of those games a year, you're not eligible for the fish scales. You got to play at least 11 Division I games to be eligible for the fish scales.
So for all those September blood donor games that we see take place,
you can have one.
You have one, but if you get East Toenail State Wesleyan followed by Boogaloo Who,
you're out.
You're out. Okay, I got you. Right.
Yeah, you're out, and you're not eligible for the fish scales. So, and if you lose to one of those teams, you're not eligible to be ranked either because you don't deserve to be.
Okay, I get it.
Sure.
So rankings now, as you mentioned, the bowl committee put out their rankings. Where do you stand on this? And what's been the biggest, I guess, difference you've had? Let's say, as Howard, we'll go back 5 years. What's the biggest difference you've had compared to what we see from AP and the Coaches Association and everybody else who has a ranking? What's been the biggest difference, or who's the one team that probably, I wouldn't call them a fraud, but the one team that probably gets too much love because of reputation?
I hate saying it because they've been so good, but I would say early in years, like in after week 7 or week 8, I think the team that gets it based solely on reputation is Alabama.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were.
And I hate saying it because they've earned it, right? I mean,
yeah.
But I think after week 7 or 8, and you see Alabama or 1 or 2, it's like, oh, come on, they haven't played anybody. But
here's the difference though. When they do have to play good teams,
then they take care of business.
Then they handle their business. So I think their reputation precedes them where, they may play some softies, but when there's time to play really good teams, they not only show up, they normally beat them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think by the end of the year, when they're in that top 4, they've earned it, and that's where they deserve to be. I just think early in the season, they usually don't. You look at Alabama right now. Actually a few good wins, beating Texas on the road, beating Arkansas on the road, and then beating Mississippi State. So they have a few good wins. I have them as the third best one-loss team right now, based solely on what they've done. Now, by the end of the year, can that change and they can move up? Absolutely. It changes every single week based on who you've beaten, because beating a Texas team now, you might get credit for doing that. But if Texas goes out and, they fall apart the next 4 weeks, well, now all of a sudden that's not a big win for you if Texas' record changes. So it's fluid every single week how these teams are ranked. But Alabama's one of those teams I think they get a little too much credit. I think a team that's a good question. A team that maybe they accomplish less than you think is Michigan too. Their wins aren't that great. They're just not that great.
Well, and a lot of it depends on that's the conference that they play in.
That's right,
the Big Ten, and this is why I think that conference realignment is almost inevitable, because we have this silly debate every year, right? Whose conference is better, which teams are better. You'll never know until the teams play each other.
Right.
And that's the worst part about it. Like Alabama right now, they're sitting at number 6, I believe, in the CFP rankings. As soon as they play in the championship, whoever they play, I'm assuming I don't know if it'll be Tennessee or Georgia, but we'll find out after this weekend, more than likely.
Yeah.
If they beat the team in the SEC East, they're going to be right back in the top 4 again. Because right now, Tennessee's number 1, right?
Yes.
I think Georgia's number 3.
Yep.
So I'm not sure the criteria that they use to spot those teams where they are, like this week. So how does Georgia go from where they were all the way to 3?
Yeah, undefeated, by the way, haven't lost since last year.
Yeah.
National champions and came in this year and beat everybody on the schedule.
Well,
how did they slip?
Yeah.
It's so much about what have you done for me lately? What's the latest thing that I've seen on TV? What's the latest they've looked like? And again, it's so much personal opinion of human beings that are determining where these teams are ranked. And that's what I've always had a problem with, and because it will be automatic. I think it's foolish to think that they don't have some sort of opinion on, we can't have Tennessee and Georgia be 1-4 or Alabama and Georgia be 1-4 because we don't want them to play again. So we got to do it 1-3. So there's a flaw already right off the bat on how teams are going to be ranked. And then it's just, it's solely on what have you done now. We forget about what's happened in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. We see what's happened right now. And that's a problem. The team this week that's the top in the fish scales is Clemson. And I think that would surprise a lot of people. But what they've done this year is they've accomplished more than anybody else. They've gone on the road and beaten a Wake Forest team that's ranked in the fish scales top 25. They've beaten an NC State team ranked in the top 25. They won on the road at Florida State. They beat Syracuse, ranked in the top 25. Now LSU's beaten LSU, or Tennessee's beaten LSU, Alabama, and Kentucky. Very formidable, very good, but not as good as what Clemson's done so far. But Clemson's not going to be up there because we look at, Tennessee's in the SEC. All right, well, then just vote the top 4 SEC teams as the best 4 teams in the country. I mean, if that's what we're going for, just do that. So I think it's just too much based on reputation, and something needs to happen where there's some sort of formula to try and make it fair, and that's what I try to do with my ranking.
I'm a fan of just get rid of the rankings, period, and line up all the top conferences. Or just line up the conferences at the end of the year and let the conferences play. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and just have a playoff among the conferencies and have your national championship based on that. I think
we're going in that direction, Howard.
Yeah. I agree with both of you. I think that's exactly what we're doing. That's the direction we're going. You're going to have a 24-team SEC, a 24-team Big 10, and that's all it's going to matter.
That's right.
And so at the end, those two will play. And for all the other little schools that say, well, what about us? Where's our seat at the table? You don't have a seat at the
We
table
got a
now.
table for you. It's right over here.
The kids'
Right
table.
over
The kids'
here.
table.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Fish, I know your time is short. I want to thank you for being part of what we do. So if people want to follow you, because you have a variety of platforms to work from, not only the Memphis Grizzlies, but the Fish Scales, and you got some other things that you're doing online. So tell everybody what's the best way they can find you, and how often can they find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. That's the best place to find me. It's at The Fish Nation, on Twitter. On Instagram, too, the Fish Scales I put on there as well. That's at The Fish Nation _ for Instagram. So you can find me there. And then each week, every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. live on Grind City Media YouTube channel. That's the Grizzlies media conglomerate. I have a show called The Odds Couple that we break down and handicap all the action for the weekend from a betting point of view, college football, NFL, 10 a.m. every Thursday morning. And if you missed the live version, you can catch it wherever you get your podcasts. I do a baseball podcast called Infield Fly, and then Brevin Knight and I do a podcast called Night Court. So
Night Court.
I'm in the podcast verse is where you can find me right now.
And of course, if we need Lou Holtz to show up somewhere on one of these podcasts, I'm sure you can bring him up as well.
It's not a very good football team, Mike.
That's pretty good. That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I think Mike, we should go to Memphis for sure.
Yes.
Oh no, we going. Yeah,
we
check out the Grizzlies
and hang out with Rob and catch the Grizz.
Absolutely,
We're
absolutely. You guys are welcome anytime. You must make that a trip.
All right, he's Rob Fischer. We'll be back with more after we take this time out on Huddle Up with Howard on ClaibsOnline.com.
There's always been a bright side to living in downstate Illinois. Ameren, Illinois is making it even brighter with a little help from the sun. Right now, we're building a next-generation solar facility to bring you cleaner energy for generations to come. It's good for the environment, your neighborhood, and everyone living in downstate Illinois. That's brighter thinking. That's energy at work. Learn how you can participate in solar programs at amerenillinois.com/renewables.
St. Louis Acura has an unbeatable selection of new cars arriving daily, like the all-new 2023 Acura Integra. We also have a great selection of over 200 pre-owned and factory precision courtesy vehicles with finance rates as low as 1.9% for 36 months with approved credit. And we've added Saturday service hours to our newly renovated service facility. Don't forget, we'll buy your vehicle here at our dealership or from the convenience of your home. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you.
Welcome back. It's Huddle Up with Howard. I'm Mike Claiborne. Howard Richards, the host of this show, is with us as well. Good to visit with Fish and kind of clear up some things about this college football rankings. And you know, Howard, he makes a lot of good points about how this thing is perceived. And with that said, I think you touched on something that's imminent. In these Power 5 conferences are going to secede from the NCAA, and they're going to come up with their own set of rules. And I think rankings and ratings will be part of it.
Well, I think it'll ultimately be better. We look at just how the rankings are done today, and we know that those people that vote on teams don't get to see all those games. And we know the people that are deeply involved are the ones that are watching their own teams, especially within their own conferences. And that's where I think that we're going. The NCAA doesn't get a chance to look at all these schools, even with what it does as a quote unquote oversight board. They're legislating on infractions, and we've seen this week that it's almost comical. I mean, look at Kansas. Kansas has been under the umbrella of an FBI investigation, and it comes out and self-imposes, it's just laughable penalties. That Bill Self is going to sit out 4 games of
and only one
no one's ever heard of.
Exactly, except Duke. All right,
Yeah,
that's the only one, and Duke going through a transition, so we don't know how good they're going to be. And I think that's one of the things that the NCAA didn't step down on more, and which gives them very little credibility. And that's why I think that's another reason why these Power 5 schools are going to walk away from the NCAA, because they can't punish themselves, and they've turned it over to the inmates in the asylum. I mean, it's a joke. It truly is.
You know, I agree. If you don't,
and they
know
had
the
a chance to
facts,
do something about it.
yeah, if you don't know
They've
the
had a
facts,
chance to
how
do
can you
something
make
about it.
decisions? How can you make sound decisions if you don't know all the information? Whereas the conferences are intimately involved. You know, the commissioner is on the phone with every school every week. You know, sometimes more than once a week. So that line of communication is always open. And then their compliance departments are always in communication with the league office. So it's a constant two-way process, if you will, that doesn't occur with the NCAA. So I just think it'll ultimately, the product will be better. We see that expansion is inevitable. We talked about that, and I do see at some point, you just take the SEC. That's where Missouri sits. I see it becoming a stronger conference because it will ultimately start to pick off those schools, whether it's a Clemson, whether it ultimately is a Notre Dame or someone like that, because it's going to make it stronger. But also those schools are going to be lured in for one reason. What is that?
Money.
No doubt. No doubt.
TV money is insane.
It is. And you all need it to survive. You know, expenses are going up. You've got to be able to do more at your university to make it more appealing. You've got to, you know, continue to build new buildings and implement new technologies. That's how you do it. You need cash to be able to do that. And that's why it's so attractive to do so.
Let me ask you a question. With everybody obsessed with the TV money, and I get it, what happens when these Power 5 schools leave the NCAA and they're no longer the SEC or the Big Ten? Now, I don't know if they can carry that name with them. I'm sure they can. Do they go back to the TV networks and say, that was a deal you did when we were at the NCAA? Now you're talking to us as a private, as we're separate from what we were known to be part of the NCAA. Do they renegotiate TV deals? And will we see something along the line of what we're seeing or what we're going to see with the NBA, where they've gone from a 9-year, $24 billion deal, and the estimates now are their next TV deal, it will start at $50 billion and has a chance to get to $70 billion. So will we see them, like, say there's a new sheriff in town and you're looking at them?
I think that's a distinct possibility. I don't know that we know the answer yet, but it just kind of look at where the tea leaves are leading us. I don't know if deals are going to be renegotiated, but you know, you made comments, I believe, with Frank Cusimano earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. We're talking about how you can find programming. You know, it used to be on-air TV, then cable TV came along. And now people are screaming
TV.
About that's
now
right.
Streaming.
Yeah. It's the wave of the future. That's how, with those subscriptions, that's where the money's going to be coming from. And you're going to see it. It probably will evolve into that. And I think it's probably the way to go. People are going to probably be able to save in some ways because they're not paying for services that they're not watching. But for the things that they want to see, they're going to be willing to pay a lot more because they're getting the exact things that they want to do. So the exact programming that they actually want to see. So what costs will just go through the roof.
Let's get to the field for a minute. Let's talk a little college football. There's some big games coming up. We'll start locally with Missouri, who, 4 weeks ago was almost put on life support. They go to South Carolina, and I don't care who it is. When you go on the road and beat somebody in the SEC, that's big news. Now, all of a sudden, they have a chance that bowl eligibility is in play. This is an important weekend because they're facing a good team in Kentucky who got the poo beat out of them by UT the other week. And so we don't know how they feel physically. I'm sure they're mentally scarred. What do you see as far as Kentucky and the impact they can have? Because they are a good football team that Missouri's had a problem with in the past.
Yeah, I still see Kentucky as a problem. First and foremost, Mark Stoops, I would never discount anything that he does because he's proven each year that he has had his team right where they need to be. And programmatically, that's the way I think if you're looking at instilling a coach into your program and developing players and elevating that program, Mark Stoops is the example. And
so you're saying he coaches
further
guys up?
No, he does. And it's further proof. He's being mentioned for jobs that are open right now. And the season's not even over. So it's a testament to the job that he's done. So I'd be surprised if Kentucky wasn't ready to play. They're licking their wounds after getting somewhat embarrassed at Tennessee. So they're going to come to Columbia, Missouri on Saturday and want to make amends for that. But he's facing a Missouri team that, its identity, especially offensively, didn't exist. There was very little leadership. But suddenly after 2 weeks, and especially after last week at South Carolina, and the offense played its best game of the year, this team has learned to realize that if you don't beat yourself, you can play competitive football. And before the season started, when I looked at this Missouri team and I looked at its schedule and the games that I thought Missouri would win, it was based on the team that I saw in South Carolina, not the team that I saw in the previous weeks, because it was a complete game, right? That's who I thought this team would be in the third season of Eli Drinkwitz, but it started off very disappointingly. What I want to know now is, will we see the South Carolina Missouri going forward, or will we see versions of pre-South Carolina going forward?
Let's talk a little bit about the game of the season so far, Tennessee and Georgia. I don't think anybody's surprised by what Georgia's been able to do. I think people have been pleasantly delighted by the performance of Tennessee at home and on the road. And obviously their coming out party started when they beat Alabama. Now you can go back and look at that game and say, well, maybe Alabama should have won it, but they didn't. So how do you see that game? Because Tennessee is on Missouri's schedule down the road as well.
No doubt. The week after Missouri plays
New Mexico State. Oh, Kentucky.
No,
right.
it's next weekend. Missouri has to go
boy.
to UT. I see Tennessee, and the interesting thing about Tennessee is that how quickly Josh Heupel has turned it around. And for those that aren't aware, Josh Heupel was the offensive coordinator at Missouri under Barry Odom. So he coached up Drew Lock. In fact, Drew Lock led the SEC in touchdown passes. I believe this is his last year, his second to last year, his junior year at Missouri. I think he had 44 that year, which was the record until this kid from LSU, Joe Burrow, came along and shattered it with, I think 55 or upwards to 60 touchdown passes, which I don't know anyone's going to approach that record anytime soon. It was just amazing what he was able to accomplish. But they've been able to do it in light of the fact that they were, under NCAA investigation for the things that Jeremy Pruitt came in and just kind of almost ruined that program again.
Yes.
But give credit to Heupel and the staff that he's built and how his players have played very hard for him. And I think a strong Tennessee is very good for the SEC, and especially for the SEC East. The balance has shifted. It becomes a little more balanced now. You got two top five teams right now in the same division. It's not so much just SEC West with Alabama and, well, you got a down Auburn, and Texas A&M is down, but LSU's back up again now. So it's very interesting because I think that's what people hunger for. Regardless of who wins, they want to see competitive teams in the field of play, especially at this time of year as the season progresses towards the conference championships. You want to see teams that are going to be good from kickoff to final gun. And potentially that's what we're going to see. This Tennessee-Georgia matchup may be one of the highest rated football games in college history when it's all said and done.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think because it's not Alabama, it's not Ohio State, it's not the name teams that we see every year.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, talking about it's good for the SEC that Tennessee is is playing well, and I think they can do this for a long time. And I think because there's no dominant team in the country, to have Tennessee raise their hand and say, "Hey, we don't mind competing for that," I think it's great for college football, and I'm looking forward to it. But there's another game that's going on that nobody's talking about. LSU and Alabama are going to have a chance to get together, and Brian Kelly and Nick Saban have had some history in the past. And I know Kelly will be able to use, well, this is my first year here at LSU, and I don't think Nick Saban gives a damn about it being his first year.
Nope.
This will be a scuffle also.
It will. And I don't think he used that excuse either. Just look at his record.
Yeah.
Their records are identical. Does LSU have 2 losses or 1?
2 losses.
2 losses. And Bama has 1. So they're only separated by 1 loss. And to me, that's about as even as you could be with minus, teams with having identical records. But it will show the progress, much like Tennessee, that Brian Kelly has brought to LSU in a program that a lot of people thought, how can it recover on the heels of what Ed Orgeron and how Les Miles kind of ruined it, if you will, for all of LSU. I mean, that was the epitome of a dumpster fire a couple of years ago with the changing of the guard at the athletics administration and all the other nonsense that was going on there. So it's now, I think, the respectability seemingly is back. And now you've got 2 marquee teams that are going to be going at it for pretty much bragging rights.
We got a lot to talk about next week when we have our next edition of Huddle Up with Howard. We'll certainly be talking about the Georgia-Tennessee game and LSU and Alabama, Missouri, who's back on the run, and we'll have a chance to really see the bowl-eligible Illinois team. We'll talk about that as well as the NFL that comes your way next week. For Rob Fischer, Howard Richards, I'm Mike Claiborne. We thank you for another edition of Huddle Up with Howard on claibsonline.com, and we'll talk to you soon.